Okay, hey, welcome back to part two. Sorry, my phone cut out on me, so I'm going to have to just restart real quick. We'll just start with the election of 1868 with President Grant. He wins the election pretty overwhelmingly. He's the victorious general from the Civil War, kind of a nation's hero, right? The radical Congress is still working its way through the final amendment that they're going to pass during this time. They're going to propose and ratify the 15th Amendment, which is going to grant the right to vote to all males regardless of race. The book does a nice job about talking about how the abolition movement was very inclusive to women, and women really felt backstabbed, really felt left out of this amendment. They felt like Congress and African American leaders could have waited maybe a little longer to push for the inclusion of women. Kind of does a nice job of showing both sides of that argument. Regardless, women get left out of this. They're not going to receive their right to vote until the 1920s. Okay, so the book talks a little bit about union leagues, which are basically a kind of a form of African American political parties that are going to take place in the South. Going to do a great job of achieving tremendous victories for African Americans in the South. They send numerous African American members to the House of Representatives. They send a few to the Senate, the two from Mississippi senators. But they do a tremendous job of getting former slaves, freed slaves, elected in local government, right? And so this is going to create a real problem in Southern society. And it's going to be coupled with another issue. If you look on your text on page 467, it discusses this. I think in the middle paragraph, it discusses that Reconstruction is going to spend a lot of time rebuilding roads and railroads in the South, establishing public education in the South, which really was non-existent before the Civil War. If you wanted education, typically, you're from the gentry, you're from the upper class, upper ranks of society, and your family could afford private tutors. There was no need for public education for everybody, and so they start to impose taxes on the South. And if you remember way back from your high school history classes, the South is absolutely cash poor. One of the reasons that they were so resistant to the end of slavery was that's where all your wealth was. Your wealth was tied up in your land, and your property being slaves, right? And so you're tremendously cash poor, but you have wealth based on your land or based on your holdings. And so now this new northern government's going to come in, and they're going to impose taxes that need to be paid with money. And so, you have no way really to pay that. And then they're also going to be tearing away your local economy, your local social structure. They're electing former slaves, people that possibly you owned, all of a sudden now get a say over what goes on in your town. And it's too much for the South to handle at that point. And so you're going to see the rise of vigilante groups. The book talks about the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, which is the most popular of the groups, most well known in the South, that are going to use vigilante tactics, terror tactics, to try to intimidate African Americans from going to the polls. You're going to see this idea of sharecropping pop up to replace that. This as a replacement to the slave wage economy, the slave economy, in which landowners are basically going to lease property to individuals in exchange for that individual buying seed, buying product from them on loan. And so, if the rich white people didn't have money, then the poor black people definitely didn't have money. And so you end up in this situation where nobody has any money, but yet the rich white people figure out a way to put the poor black people in debt. And once you can get somebody in debt, then you can hold them down in society, right? Democratic Party is going to rise up in the South. It was there before the Civil War. It was the popular party that time. They're going to see a resurgence in the late 1860s, early 1870s, where they're going to start to win some political elections. This is going to be in part to maybe better political organization, but it's also going to be in part to groups like the Klan that are going out and limiting black activity in the voting process, right? Reconstruction is going to come to an end in 1877. We're going to have the presidential race of 1876. It's going to end in some controversy. There's a number of states that are up for grabs after the votes are called. You have Ruffleford, that's my favorite first name of a president, B. Hayes, who runs as a Republican. Tilden runs as a Democrat. Tilden's a reformer out of the North. He's out of New York, and of course he's going to carry the majority of the South. He wins some states, and I think there's 6 states if I remember right that are up for let's see, Louisiana, South Carolina, Florida, and Oregon. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Four states are up for grabs. There's 20 electoral votes. Hayes needs all 20 to win, and the Constitution doesn't go through exactly what should happen, and so there's this committee that gets elected, and there's some backroom politics, and people resign, and there's all this mess. And basically, the end is this: the Republicans steal the election. They take all 20 electoral votes. They give them to Hayes. Hayes passes the threshold of whatever the number is in 1876. He wins the election. The Democrats pull this deal that, hey, we'll give you the presidency in exchange for ending this military occupation of the South. You get out of the South. Take your troops, take your generals. Everybody leaves the South. Leave us alone, and let us go back to the way things were before the Civil War. And that's basically what happens. We end up in a situation where after 1877, the federal troops leave the South. You see the black codes increase. The terror used by the Klan is increased. Even though you see presidential movement by Grant and other presidents to try to limit their power, they try to pass laws to reduce the power of those organizations. They're relatively unsuccessful. And so you end up with Reconstruction, which 100% fails. The South is in no better position than they were at the end of the war. African Americans in the South were in no better position. If possibly, I don't think that you could argue that that's a worse position than slavery. At least you have your freedom. But economically, they're in a very, very bad place. Education-wise, the free education system that's going to begin to prosper during Reconstruction is going to fall apart. And Reconstruction is just going to be a dismal failure after the Civil War. So that's going to conclude this little lecture. I'm going to try to figure out a way where I can do a split screen, get some PowerPoint notes up, some things for you guys to follow along, make it a little bit more entertaining as we go. And we will see you next week when we look at westward expansion, which is a little bit more of a fun topic than Reconstruction, a little bit more upbeat. And I will see you then. Thank you very much.